Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to The Horizon, the voice of the Amba woman. Today is May 23rd, and we will be talking about events of the past week, particularly May 20th. We also will be talking today on this program about chieftaincy in Southern Cameroons. Before I bring on my guest for today's program, let me seize this opportunity to salute everyone watching, particularly our Ambazonia State Army, who defend and protect our people day in, day out. I want to salute those Southern Cameroonians, Ambazonians who believe in our vision, who believe in the right for us to one day have total control over our territory, who know the history and learn the history and support the history of the Southern Cameroons people. I want to also send special salute to our refugees, those all over the diaspora that watch this program weekly. Thank you for being there, and we are here because you're there. With me today is one great giant in our quest, Barrister Tim Mbeseha, who has been on this program in the past. And it's a pleasure to have you here today, Barrister Mbeseha. Welcome to The Horizon, the voice of the Amber Woman.
Thank you for thank you for having me. I hope I will contribute to the knowledge of what you people want to present today. And over to you.
I, I have no doubt about that. Your weekly program on the ABC on Saturdays gives us a lot of information, and I'm sure you will do the same here today. So again, the topic today has to do with the 20th May that just happened a few days ago, and also we'll be talking about chieftaincy in Southern Cameroons. But before we delve into it, Barrister, uh, could you please just remind us, the audience, what form of the state, what the form of the state was before 1992, that fateful referendum took place? What was the form of the state in Southern Cameroons?
Before 1972, that is May 20th, 1972, it was something called a federation, the Republic of Cameroon. I say something called, I use my words very carefully, because even though there was something called the Federation, the Federal Republic of Cameroon, there was in fact and in law no federation at all. No. And I think this will give me the opportunity to explain legally and factually why, in fact, May 20th was accumulation of different actions that had been planned secretly to undo British Southern Cameroon from 1961. Over to you.
Thank you so much. So you said it was a federation, but it was really a fake situation. It was not real. But let's move into what is we want to talk about today. Were there any peculiarities during the few months leading to 20th May? Were there anything suspicious that people should have at least known something wrong, something was going awry before 20th May took place?
Well, immediately before 20th May, immediately, because I will take us back, but immediately, was there something wrong that could have raised alarm to any ordinary person? Yes, there was something wrong. The thing that went wrong was Mr. Abiedu had gone to France because Cameroon is a puppet of France. They had gone to France early in May and returned to Cameroon about May 6th, late in April. And then suddenly summoned Mr. Funcher to his palace. Remember, by then they had dismissed Funcher. And then, of course, very unusually, he announced a referendum. That is May 6th, to take place on May 20th, exactly 2 weeks after that. So what was a referendum? People have asked me this question. What do they mean by referendum? Or what were they doing on May 20th? They were to answer a question. The population of Cameroon as a whole was to answer the question, do you wish to adopt a new constitution that will replace the so-called federal constitution come May 20th? Answer yes or no when the day comes on May 20th. But remember, like anything Cameroonian, it was not a single ballot election vote. Yes, according to them, was to be indicated by a ballot paper written there, yes, and white. Objected to it, it was to be indicated by a ballot paper written there, no, and it was supposed to be black. But most interestingly is that for these 2 weeks, the so-called constitution that people were approving, were supposed to approve, nobody knew the content. Nobody knew the content of the new constitution, supposedly coming to abolish the federal constitution come May 20th. So those were the events that signaled something wrong forward,
Yeah.
just before May 20th.
So we know now that, well, we've always known that Ahidjo was getting orders from France, and that has continued till today. But again, it's a shame that our people were not able to fight to maintain the federation. There must have been a lot of fear. What do you say about that? Because why would the people not fight and rebel once they realize what happened? Go on the streets and demonstrate. Why couldn't they do that?
They couldn't do it. They couldn't do it. Let me go back again. I said that will help me to explain to people what had gone wrong from the beginning, which in fact would answer that question, why the people could not fight back. All of us remember that there was this resolution 1608 that was supposed to consolidate the result of the plebiscite of 11 February, dealing with independence by joining. When the thing came before the General Assembly formally on April 21st, 1991, Cameroon, that was already a member of the United Nations, that was supposed to be joining them, voted no, along with all African countries, including France itself. Remember, France had a veto power at the United Nations. They all voted no to that resolution independence by joining.
Yeah.
And so, in principle, after having voted no, after Cameroon had been voted no, that would have been the end of the business. Because like any other marriage, if one of the spouses says no, you cannot go forward to marry them. And so, but that was what they didn't know. They didn't want it. But in spite of that, the United Nations nonetheless insisted on independence by joining, by then including paragraph 5 of that resolution, which required the parties to come together and agree on the formalities of their joining.
Right.
Come August. That was the ball set out there. From that moment onwards, France, as the main actor, with La République de Cameroon behind them, went into active gear to destroy what they did not even want in the first place. How did they do it? After April 21st, 1608, the next step was supposed to be a meeting of Cameroon, southern Cameroon, and the UK to iron out the fine prints, call it the Constitution. And so they moved on. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. They instead moved on. Just 3 months after that, come July 17, to call something they call the Fumb Conference. which by their own description, they call it the Fumb Constitutional Conference, invited Southern Cameroon to come to Fumb for the purpose of a constitution. And that conference lasted 17th to 21st. People questioned, and in particular, whether they could draw a constitution within 2 days. And so they came to Fumb as speculated on July 17th. Sat there from July 17th to July 21st. Did they draw any constitution during that Fumb? No. Therefore, can you call Fumb a Fumb Constitutional Conference? No. But you see, all on social media, they sell it as a Fumb Constitutional Conference. The narration of Yaoundé and France. And so, what went on in Fumb for the 2-3 days? They never even met together to discuss the constitution, not even once. They came together in the opening, which was just a formality, broke off, and allowed the Southern Cameroon to go sit alone somewhere and deliberate on the proposed amendment of the Cameroon Constitution and give suggestions for them to accept or reject proposals, which is what they did. They did not draw any constitution in Fumb. But after Fumb, again, to show the manipulation, came September 1st. There was now a constitution called the Federal Constitution coming from Yaoundé, which was a pure amendment of their own constitution. They call it the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Cameroon. The Southern Cameroon take part in that federal constitution? Absolutely no. It passed through the Assembly of the Republic of Cameroon. In the Southern Cameroon, what the government, what an assembly, what the House of Chiefs, it never came to them. So you see the degree of the manipulation which I'm trying to explain. It never went to Southern Cameroon, but nonetheless, it came out as a federal constitution. The document which is sold as a federal constitution, in its content, in its procedure, first, it was not a federal constitution because we were never taking part in it. In the content of that document, the content of that so-called federal constitution, there was not federal in the federal constitution. Why? Because in any federal constitution, we expect to find the duty, functions, the roles assigned to the states.
Right.
And the roles assigned to the federal government. For example, you and me live in the United States. California has its own laws. Maryland has its own laws.
Right.
By federal constitution, the federal government has its own rules. So the so-called federal constitution which they produced in Yaoundé and sent to Buea, there was nothing federal inside. Why? Because the so-called federation, Article 5 and 6, took away all what the government can do. Taxes, road construction, anything you can imagine in the world, and handed it to the federal government. They leave for the states. You go to Article 38. Article 38 simply says that whatever thing is not mentioned in Article 4 and 5, you can take it. You can take it. So there was no power for the Federated State of West Cameroon. If they had no authority to raise taxes, if they had nothing to do to get money, what were they going to do? They are going to become bankrupt. Because you can't run a government without money.
Right.
So take Article 5 and 6, as read with Article 38, showed that the so-called state of Southern Cameroon, Federated State of West Cameroon, was already gradually being killed. They had murdered it right there. And so they had timed this thing carefully in generation from generation. For example, they gave themselves 1961 to 1972. That's 10 years. Within the 10 years, the British Southern Cameroon was down. They didn't have the money because they were not allowed to raise money. So they could not exist. No. was not a mistake. And so that day, they simply came and said, the federation is over. But back to your question, why could the people not resist? Why did they not resist? October 1st was supposed to be independent, 1961. 3 months into that, Abiedu passed an ordinance number 62 to OF 18 of 19 March 1962. That ordinance in all its entirety, Article 4, 3, 4, and 5, prohibited any protest against a decree, against an order, or any act of government. And if you did it, the penalty was imprisonment. It was even where you could be sent to death. And now, if you took sent that ordinance, you could not appeal. So where, how, and where were these people going to protest? As we were told, there was even an attempt. When they announced the referendum in 1972, we were told a number of Anglophones, including Fancha, he had been removed from there. They met in Fondong's house to reflect on what to do next. And immediately they were simply dispersed to move, otherwise they would be arrested. And they left. Before that, Abiedu has sensed the danger. People who were activists, Abiedu, for example, in 1970, they had simply adopted him from Kumba and sent him to. He ended up in the north. And they would never release him until 1977, 7 years after they had instituted the United Republic of Cameroon. And so how were they going to protest? There's no way they were going to protest. And so again, you look at it and say, I said it was well planned. In the same document they call the Federal Constitution, they claimed that the federal character of the federation would never be challenged. They put Article 4 there. But how did they manipulate us to organize a referendum to change the character of the thing? But before that, they had put Article 47 to purportedly protect the federation, the federal nature of the state. And that also added Article 18. What did Article 18 say? The Federal Assembly was made up of 50 members. Southern Cameroon had only 10. Article 18 provided that if he brought anything there, that would change the character of the country or that Anglophones did not want, it would not pass. Even if all the 40 Francophones voted for it, it would not pass until 6 out of the 10 English-speaking voted for it. They will block it. So it was put there like that. But they were so careful. Article 47 and Article 18, that is so in the same constitution, could be circumvented. Why? Because in the very document, Article 2 of the Federal Constitution, they provided for a federation, for a referendum. They provided that the head of state could, by way of referendum, consult the people. In spite of Article 47, in spite of Article 18. Based on that, Abiedu could come May 6 and say, I call a referendum, irrespective of Article 47 or any other thing there. And so that is what it was. To crown it all, again, there was no federation. How could you have a federation which permitted the President of the Republic to appoint the Prime Minister, to appoint the Ministers of State, the Secretaries of State in the states, and dismiss them at will? That was put in the same constitution. So a man sitting in Boya calling himself a Prime Minister, he could not do it. He was to be appointed by the president. And so they knew all this, but they were cornered a bit. You remember, if you understand it, if you reflect it, in 1964, Foncha had moved to Yaoundé as the federal vice president. He was replaced in southern Cameroon as the prime minister. Abiedu steadily came to Buea and tried to impose Muna, 1964. Because now, the system in southern Cameroon was a parliamentary system. The party that had majority seats in parliament had to form the government. So they defeated him, and then they met Joa, who was next to Foncha as the leader of the KNDP, with a majority seats in parliament, to become premier of West Cameroon. Abiedu went back and said, well, you are stupid, you cannot defeat me, I'm clever. Went back to France. And they told her, well, since they are a parliamentary system, there's no way we can do it. If you want to do it, you must first of all abolish the parliamentary system. They want to work. The next step was to abolish multi-party, and they created the UC in 1966. Now the parliamentary system is gone. You cannot raise that argument anymore. When they created, when Foncha they dissolved all the parties and joined him, he became one party state now. 2 years after that, he came back, 1968. He was able now to use the constitution they put there, dismissed Joa, and put his own person of his choice as Timuna. See how they're acting on the constitution which they made. They could find every defense in the constitution. And so that's what they did. Came May,
Yes.
they did what they did. It may continue.
Yes, Barrister, from what I'm listening, it looks like we were really doomed from the very beginning. We're doomed from the very beginning. Moving on, since 2018, 2017, when Siseko came into power and we restored our statehood, and then 2018, we've not really 20th May was banned in our territory. So for the past 7 years, 20th May has been banned in Southern Cameroons. So talking about today's 20th May this year, we had lockdown from the 17th of May to the 21st of May. My next question to you is, how successful was the lockdown, in your opinion?
I've had the opportunity on ABC. I've had the opportunity on ABC on different programs since May 20th to give my opinion and insist that the lockdown, or call it simply the boycott of May 20th, 2025, was actually very, very, it was successful. Not by part. Because if you go on social media, on different communication services in the Republic of Cameroon, I follow them a lot. They have been debating themselves. Was this 20th May worth anything? What did it reflect? They agree that there was this boycott. But again, I find it to say this. If you look at the videos, you see some people in Buea standing there. You see some people somewhere in Bamenda or in short in major cities. But it's Bamenda, for example, the whole thing they call the grass field or not. Now, if Bamenda has a population of, say, 2 million people, if the Northwest, for example, in their own terms, has a population of 2 million people, those live in Bamenda. If the Southwest has a population of 1 million, how many live in Buea? You don't judge the strength of our so-called Anglophones by what you find in the cities, because the cities are cosmopolitan. The cities are essentially occupied by civil servants who work there, who depend on the government. So the strength of the success is not to be measured by how many people we saw standing at the grandstand. It is to be measured by what happened in the villages. If you saw
Right.
people standing in the grandstand in Bamenda, and you move just 6 kilometers to Bambui, to Bambili, how many people find there? You find standing in the grandstand in Buya. I go to a corner 3 kilometers away to Muyuka, not even to go to Kumba. How many people were going to? And it is again a mark of defeat to talk, call something where it is posts and surrounded by armored cars. It's not a celebration. But in summary, the lockdown or the boycott was, in my opinion, very, very successful. And I think 2 days ago we followed a clip, an interview from BBC when they were talking to Joa, the son of late Joa. And if it was so wonderful, this BBC, to the best of our knowledge, is in UK, based in London. The questions were coming from there. In the UK, remember the role they played in this struggle. I did not aware of what happened on May 20th. But what we saw in that interview, they are aware of what was going on. Not even to go to the answers of Honorable Joa. Because somebody will say, well, it is self-made. He said, and I'm the phone you paint it black. But the questions, the guy was only answering questions from a foreign press, not just any foreign press, not an American press, from a British forum. And so my answer to that question is that it was largely successful. They are aware of this. They are aware of this. Foreign missions in Cameroon, the US Embassy and all foreign missions are aware of this. So it was successful. The message was sent. As I said earlier, there's also much we can do during this phase of the revolution, of the struggle. There's no way we can prevent the armored cars from driving from Yaoundé to Bamenda or driving from Yaoundé to Buya. But the presence of armored cars gives two messages that the thing is not normal. Over to you.
Thank you, Barrister. I've always said that if people support a national day, if people see value in a national day, if people understand their history and why a day is important, they will flood the streets. They will flood this. They would really want to be in that stadium. You don't have to force them or incite them or bribe them to participate in a day that they love. In fact, in the United States of America here, July 4th is celebrated every year, and people look forward to the day. They buy ornaments, they buy things to wear. They take their families out. No pressure from anyone. But 20th May, because we really now understand exactly the illegalities, now the government is the one asking, brutally, of course, bribing and requesting people to participate. I would like to introduce a video. And this video was made a few days before 20th May, where the person speaking, and I would like you to talk about it. Not this one yet, the one that was made before, asking the chiefs to make sure that they present. So let's listen to this, please.
All the chiefs will march with a pancart indicating their village and their population follow behind. If that is not the case, it means those chiefs don't exist. And if you don't exist as a body, as a village, you should not be called village and counted among the village. I said it some 2 or 3 years ago. The chief refused to do it because they were still volunteers, chiefs. But today, you know that the Voluntaria is finished. Tradition is there, but you are tied to the state with an obligation. And Chief, we don't know. I don't want to disclose it here, but we understand each other. If you fail to do what I am instructing, you will see 30 days after the consequences of that disobedience. So, Lord Mayor, prepare a packet. Because they will say that they don't have money. Prepare it. You have how many villages? 100 of packets. Every chief will pass. Those who are in exile in Douala or Yaoundé, let them stay there. When they come back, they will...
Okay. You know, I want to show another video side by side so that you have enough time to comment on both. The other video that was showing a young chief being celebrated, I think we would like to see that one now. Then you can talk about both videos, Barrister.
Il faut donc dire que Sénégal, s'il y a un événement qu'on va retenir à l'occasion de la 52e édition de la fête nationale, ici même à Caen, c'est cette arrivée de ce jeune chef que vous présentez comme le plus jeune monarque de la région de l'Ouest. L'arrivée de monsieur le recteur de l'université de Caen, qui va donc prendre place à
Wonderful. So those two videos, one shows, you know, before 20th May, and then the other one on this day of the occasion. Barrister, I need you to talk about these two videos. I know the next topic has to do with chieftaincy, but as far as 20th May is concerned, I'd like you to comment on these two videos.
Before I get to the two videos, let me go back again on May 20 and start with emphasis. You know, Cameroon is a country that celebrated things that nobody can explain. Actually, nobody can explain. They can the celebration of May 20th. No, but because even UN, not the United Nations, Ochiba Nelson has asked a question somewhere in this commentary. What are they celebrating? They have done away with the United States of Cameroon. That was in by the May 20th. They've killed. So why are you celebrating it? And look backward. Disagree. What they say? They built something they call Anglophons. Anglophons came to them, either by assimilation or by any form, on the fixed date, 1st October 1961. They don't celebrate it. In fact, it's even banned. Whoever who goes out to celebrate 1st October is arrested and sent to jail. So what are they celebrating on May 20th? After having done away with the United Republic of Cameroon that was created on May 20th. Then, back to the clip of those two clips. If there's anything that ever happened to us, that all of us should ever regret until eternity, is the fact that we join a group of people who have something they call Inam, who produce something they call administrators. The administrators owe their allegiance to someone sitting in Yaoundé called the president. Presidential decree. That governor, that very governor talking there, is a product of Inam, who was giving those instructions to the chiefs in the southwest. The very people in charge, standing up there in their khaki shirts, are products of Inam.
Yeah.
Welcoming that little boy into their midst. See them there with their caps. These are products of Inam. They are wearing the same uniform. but they are behaving so differently
Yeah.
in the same circumstance. They are all celebrating May 20th. I dare you find Inam products welcoming that little boy, a little child under 14. And somewhere else, the very product of Inam doing what? Instructing chiefs, some who are older than him, to go out and march. What makes me think that this thing called Inam is a curse and shall remain a curse as far as Cameroon is concerned forever? Why? Because these products of Inam, each of them has a power, a piece of presidential decree, and they can do and undo in the little territory they are given. Some of which they call the superphase. Each of them is called chef de terre. Chef de terre. Just take, for example, let's just go back to Bamenda or to Kumba, where in Bamenda you have something they call an urban council, where you have something, Bamenda 1, Bamenda 2, Bamenda 3, and so on and so forth. Each of these Bamenda 1 is headed by a superphase, who is a product of Inam.
Yeah.
You can go to Bamenda 1, for example, and go to the superphase there and get a permit to demonstrate or to hold a meeting. And the other, this very same person who is the same khaki shirt in Bamenda 2 will refuse you right to hold the same meeting in Bamenda. I will justify it by being chef de terre of his own carved territory.
Wow.
He enjoys a presidential decree. So that's the greatest misfortune we have. That's Mr. Okala Bilai, who is sitting there in Boya, doing what he's doing. His friends in Cham, under the same other guy who is in Bamenda, who is sitting in Bafusam, a Bansom man, who calls himself also doing something very different from what is going on in Boya. But all of them backing themselves up with some presidential decrees, and we try to go to them. That's a misfortune. We'll get to address it when we'll get to the segment dealing with chiefs. It is. Over to you.
Thank you. This will be a great time to transition to the next topic that has to do with the chieftaincy. And before we get there, I just want to make sure that we didn't miss anything. So would you say that, what do you think 20th May was really about? I know you've really talked about, you've covered a lot of issues based on the questions that I've asked you, but to summarize, just give us your take-home message so that anybody listening should know exactly what 20th May was really about, and then we'll move to the next topic.
20 May, as of 2025, is not meant about any celebration of anything in Cameroon. As far as Ambazonian is concerned, that is what they call Northwest Southwest. 20 May was designed to show an attempt to show a return to normalcy after war. That's all about it. Because if 20 May has something to do with anything at all, in their own group, you don't find the same debate going on what happened in Bertrand, what happened in Garoua, what happened in other towns. You don't. So they are only interested in what happened in there with 20 May, with the covered message of a return to normalcy. War is all over. People were marching, they were eating bread, they were doing whatever thing they got done. That's the goal. 20 May became political. It's a political weapon to sell a return to normalcy, not a weapon to sell any celebration. Because as far as Ambazonia is concerned, there is absolutely nothing to celebrate. Absolutely nothing to celebrate. Even in those big towns, even in those very big towns, Koliboya, Bamenda, what are they celebrating? Are they celebrating good roads? Are they celebrating good drinking water? Are they celebrating good hospitals? If Bamenda town cannot, if Boya cannot celebrate any of these things, how much more do you expect from your own village? What are they celebrating? So there's absolutely there's nothing to show other than misery returning from being harvested from May 20th crops. It's misery. So again, to answer your question, was designed essentially to show a return to normalcy. not to celebrate anything, because in principle, there's nothing to celebrate. Over to you.
Yes, yes, yes. And there is nothing to celebrate. And the fact is that those who wasted their time, the young people that were flooding the streets, that had been giving some small cash here and there, or giving bread and sardine, they know that. They, deep down, they know that there's nothing to celebrate. But of course, if you're bullied by the governor like the chiefs, we'll see a picture of the chiefs though, how they assembled. Um, you know that it's not. It's a shame. But we're going to the next topic right now. This is a perfect time to go to the next topic about chieftaincy in Southern Cameroons. Barrister, let me start by asking you some sort of a general question. It may be a lot of information here. What can you tell us about pre-colonial chieftaincy? Because chieftaincy didn't come from nowhere; it came from somewhere.
Yes. You see, the notion of Cameroon as a country was established in 1884 during the partition of Africa in Germany. A nation called Cameroon was established in 1884. But the people who live inside that territorial confine called Cameroon did not start to exist in 1884. It was just a combination of different communities that were living. Batibo was already there. Santa was already there. Womb was already there. And so on and so forth. And so, a chieftaincy was always there. Take it from chieftaincy and call it traditional. People ruled themselves. They had governments. The only fault was that they were not documented in the way the Western culture did theirs. But what governments? The people of the Ngiji people had their own government, their own place, headed by a chief or a king. The Balis did same. The Bangwas and so on and so forth. The Bakwaris had all that. That's why you find that even on the coming of the Germans, the white man who discovered Cameroon, he signed an agreement with the Douala kings. He met them there and signed agreements with them.
Right.
So there was already authority existing before colonization came. The other colonization came was they carved out territory, put artificial boundaries, defined the territory of Germany, they defined the territory of the UK, of Portugal, and so on and so forth. So that is the basis on which our community was based. Over to you.
Wonderful. So what happened then? You just mentioned that when the Germans came, and then the British came, they had to divide all those areas. So what really happened following colonization? How did colonial rule affect chieftaincy? Because they came and they took over, so authority was more from the colonial rulers more than from the chiefs. How did things change after colonization?
During colonization, how chieftaincy or traditional institution was affected depended differently upon who was the colonial master. For example, even today, France has its own colonies, and the citizens who belong to France, to those colonies, the French colonies, they were known as part of France. In fact, they referred to them in French, France d'outre-mer. That's France. They call it territories of France. The French, that was the French policy. The British were different. When they came to Nigeria, for example, or to Ghana, the Ghanaians were not British overseas territories. The Nigerians who were to were not British overseas territories. They were just separate states. Because the whole essence of colonialism was resources to replenish their agriculture in the Industrial Revolution. One, to get labor to work on their plantations. So that was the goal of colonization. And so the British came with that goal the came with that goal. The Portuguese came with the same goal, to replenish their industry. But how they affected the institutions they made in place was so different, absolutely different. But fast forward, comparing, because we're dealing with Cameroon and we're dealing with Ambazonia, and today Ambazonia is considered to be part of so-called French Cameroon, which French Cameroon had a different colonial past. The way they look at chieftaincy was so different from the way they looked at chieftaincy from the UK administration. Fast forward in 1919, when the First World War came, and the German colony of Cameroon ceased to exist and was partitioned between the UK and France. The traditional institutions were treated differently in both sides. The French believed in centralized administration. They called themselves the masters. They ruled their colonies, including Cameroon, as part of France with decrees. The British did not govern or rule whatever thing was assigned to them called British Southern Cameroon as part of the UK. They came with their own system of governance, which they call indirect rule. Indirect rule. What did indirect? Indirect means simply they did not set up offices in Bamenda or in Kumba or in Manfi. No. They allowed the customary people to rule themselves. Since the interest was only economic, if they needed labor, they gave to the fund and said, they give to people who don't work in plantations. It's a fund where the people took them there. They instituted tax collectors. They say, okay, the fund one come, or whatever it is. How many people do you have? You have 100 people, the poll tax is £1. The fund brought, collected the tax, and went and paid to the colonial master. The colonial master did not go to bad people to take taxes from. That was indirect rule. If somebody stole a goat, they didn't have any police force. The chief arrested that guy, and they tried him if it is compatible, according to the tribal people. Or if it was a boya, according to the tradition of the Bakore, if you steal, or if you rape a woman, things like that. So it was indirect. And so, based on that indirect rule, the conception of chiefs or traditional rulers, I like to call them traditional rulers, because chiefs, as they call it, englobe so many things, different appellations. What we call the southern zone today, they call them chiefs. In the northwest, northern zone, they call them fawns. But above that, in the far north, they call them the Abiedu. But they all rule traditional authority. And so traditional authority had a lot of power. And we may be reminded that the whole territory called British Southern Cameroon only 6 administrative units. 6. The colonial administrator, one start in Victoria, called it Boya. They call the Victoria. We don't have this Limbe and all that stuff. It started in Victoria, and you know what we call the Fiasco. There was one in who governed all that thing we call Kupe, Manu, Kumbe, and Diam. There was one in Manfi. That government, President Manfi, acquired Libya, and with the coup. There was one in Bamenda division. That included Boyo, part of Ngoku Tunja, and all those things I can find there. And more. There was one in Kambe and there was one in Wum. This 6 not they didn't have the superface. No. Their people who were doing the job were the chiefs. And they understood, having gone, in fact, what they were doing as was not only able to Southern Cameroon, they have been practicing the same thing in Nigeria. Remember, Nigeria had been colonized longer than 1884. They have been doing the same thing in Ghana. Feel the value of African kings or chiefs, whatever name you want to give to them. These are people who had influence. And so the use of those people, whereas the French actively were having their role. If we go, for example, to the Chieftaincy law of 1977, they are referring to some text of 1933, a text of 1933 in France, and which honoring their chieftaincy role in Cameroon back in 1977. You do not find such things in southern Cameroon now. It was in the regular rule. The chiefs were the pivotal administrators. They were recognized as such. The issue is, simply put, the British came in, as far as chief is concerned, with the approach of recognition, to recognize the institute. The French came in with the idea of creation. They created their own chiefs. They formed chiefdoms for themselves, designated them, and created leaders over it. And so, whereas a Bamanda king or Fumb who wear those regalia, the performer wears his cap or Bakrema wears his wrapper, and you see a chief with his broom. In Yaoundé, they will not do that. They were forced to wear uniforms designed by the colonial master of France. Most of them were khaki with a beret, just like the Jews wear. And so I've always given this example many times before. If you ever go to Yaoundé, I go to some post Sankla, I am going to the Ministry of Finance. To the left, if you just move for 500 yards, you see the statue of the king of Wundos, Chief Atangana. He's put there in a military attire. Could you ever see somebody in Bamenda, in the northwest, in Bamso, anywhere, in the military attire, going, so this is the front of the song, or the front of ballet? You will not find out those of things there. So that's basically the difference. Maybe I listen to you for further questions.
Interesting. So I missed something. I mean, maybe others didn't pick it up, but just briefly, could you just say again what indirect rule again was? Because I think the internet was a little bit off.
Indirect rule was the colonial master used the local leaders, traditional rulers, to govern the colonies that they had control over. They used chiefs in the case of the Southwest or the grass or the forest area, the farms in the case of the grass-free areas, widows in the case of the northern Fulani areas. And how were they using them? I gave the example to say, if you calculate the work, the colonialism was economic. If people, which they needed all the time, the first plantations they opened, colonial plantations, were in Laduma. If they needed somebody to open plantation, had his plantation in Laduma or in Boya, because they had federal land there. They will come to the front of the bank or to the front of the valley and say, I need 10 people to work in my farm. The front of the valley will go for them. The colonial master will not go and catch you. No. The front of the valley will go for them. If they say we wanted tax, £50, the front of the soul will go and collect the taxes on it. That's in the group. See the local population, the local leaders who found whatever you call them, to administer the territory. And as our analyze going down, as independence came, that progressively was.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Barrister. Now let's move on. Let's talk about the Southern Cameroon's House of Chief. Why was it called House of Chief, and who were the founding fonds or chiefs when that body came into existence?
Now, the Southern Cameroon House of Chiefs, if I start from the House of Chiefs, you probably will not understand, people will not listen, people will not understand how they got there. Using the idea of indirect rule, the British used chiefs. As 1959 and 1960 approached, when independence was coming, These are people who have been ruling the people. These are people who have been used throughout the administration. They did not want to go to independence, ignoring those people. They knew that chiefs had to play an important role in the future independent country because they are the ones who have been administering the territory for the white man. So as they moved on, the power of the chiefs began to be concentrated. What did they do? Right from Lagos, they created what they call authorities, native authorities, the NA. If you are older, you will remember something that is called NA school, Native Authority School. These native authorities englobed a number of villages, a number of tribes that had something similar, NA. For example, in Boya, that the NA, the Bakweri. In fact, today we call it Boya. Recently, there was nothing called Boya Council. It was called the Bakweri Council. So they embodied all the people in the Bakweri, and they created a native authority for them. The leaders in that native authority were the chiefs or the farms. In Fako, for example, that the Bakweri, and you had NA courts, native authority courts, which we subsequently call customary courts. With cases according to the custom of the Bakweri. But for example, it's basically a matter of two tribes. They had the Bakweris, who are over Fako, and the Balons, who are in Mpundo, they are in Muyoka, they are in Yoke, and they are in Malinde. They had the Balon customary court. If you go to Muyoka today, what they call the court of first instance is the Balon customary court hall. So they brought these people together into the group. We went to the Bama, for example, that the NA, Native Authority, that included the Mundanis, because they have something similar in their culture, included the Bangos, included the Opan Komo, the Bols, because they spoke almost the same language. So that an NA, Native Authority, these things even progress to creating schools, NA school Fantem, NA school Bari, NA school this. So these were basically structures meant to be rolled according to tradition. But fast forward, as they moved towards independence, they started to consolidate these things. Political parties were formed, especially in West Cameroon. Political parties became effective when we withdrew from Nigeria. The political parties were meant to play political roles. But the chiefs under the NA were not politicians. They were not politicians. They were a powerful institution that was not playing the role of politics. And so they had to be included in the administrative political movement to independence. In case of Southern Cameroon, for example, just fast forward for lack of time, they had the first conference in 1959 in Manfred, the conference. The Manfred conference was called a conference of all parties, all political parties. There were 6 political parties that were supposed to meet in Manfred and agree on the future of Southern Cameroons. But not only the parties met there. In addition to all the parties, they had a delegation of the chiefs. There were 10 chiefs represented in the Manfred Independence Conference.
Okay.
Represented the interests of the people, not their political parties. In Manfred, they had the KNC, they had the CPNC, the KNDP, and so on, different parties. But the chiefs were represented there. They are moving to independence now. They were moving to independence. So they were as an institution. This is 1959. Fast forward again. When after the plebiscite, prepare for a constitutional discussion as per Resolution 1608. They met in Bamenda. They now met in Bamenda again. All the parties, the opposition, Indele and the rest, they all came there. But there was also a delegation of chiefs only in the Bamenda Constitutional Drafting Commission. There was a delegation of 8 Their names are well written there, who represented the institution as advisory, they bargained for their people. So they were included in the political movement to independence. And fast forward permanently, they came to the constitutional so-called Fumb Conference. The Fumb 50 delegates, the chiefs alone, they had their own representation. The House of Chiefs, I'm talking about the House of Chiefs. The House of Chiefs were separate. They were not KNDP, they were not CPNC, they were not all one not. They came there as chiefs. And they had a delegation of 6 or 7. So that's how the institution was protected under the British Southern Cameroon administration. It is that protection that gave birth to the House of Chiefs in 1960, which House of Chiefs started playing the role that all of us have understood. It became something like a parliament, like the Senate, but they were not actually like the Senate, but they were like the House of Lords in London, but it was a House of Chiefs. It was supposed to be 20 or 21 chiefs who came there to represent something, to represent the institutions. And so that's the House of Chiefs. If you were, I heard you asking, they have them there, but I can give you a number of them if you don't mind it. They included, for example, the founder of Baffut, he was there, the founder of Bali was there, the founder of Com was there, the founder of Sot was there, Morford the Third was there, the founder of Aga of Balikumbal was there, Anaga was there, Gogomo was there, Kibong was there, Ferguson Williams from there, from Victoria was there, the founder of Fontem was there, Mokambe from Bonge, Banja from Mokonje in Kumba, they were all there. Mokete, which chieftaincy is almost extinct, was there. Chief Endele was there. And so they constituted the House of Chiefs. These and a few other names are not there. That was what the House of Chiefs was.
Wow.
Any further?
A lot of information. The history is so important that I hope our people continue to learn this information, because if we're trying to build a better Ambazonia, we need to know exactly what we had in the past. So moving forward, what does the future hold for our chiefs and funds? I ask this question because we've seen or heard instances where people are buying chieftaincy, or chiefs are being elected by La Republique Cameroon and installing them on our people. What do you think the future holds for our chiefs and funds as we move on?
What the future holds for our funds, our chiefs, will depend upon where we end with this struggle. A lot of damage has been done to the institution. Can we come back to it? Of course we should, on arrival in Mbuya. But looking at what it is going on now, see, I said earlier that the British came in with recognition, recognizing the institutions that existed. The French came in with the creation of their own institutions. And that is what has influenced the chieftaincy. What you see happening in Mbuya, what you see happening everywhere, is based on the notion that they can create. That Yambe is creating institutions, creating chiefs, creating chiefdoms, and so on and so forth. In our own context, it was recognition. And so the basic text of application that has made them to be doing all that is Decree number 77245 of 15 July 1977. That decree came in 2 years after the May 20th abolition of our institutions. What does the decree do? Like any other Francophone law, Cameroon law, let me just put it this way, their laws are never complete. Progress the 96 Constitution. It was passed in 1996. This is 2026, almost 20 years or more, close to 30 years. It is still being implemented progressively. And so they put out those laws, they put what they want there, and they implement them piecemeal. And so the 1977 law on chieftaincy created the issue of chiefdoms, creation of to this extent. You see, they have succeeded largely in the so-called southern zone, and most particularly in Fako. Have they succeeded in the grass field? Not yet. But are they trying? Yes. They are trying to do something there. I think just a month or two ago, we had this argument between Akum and Sanda. Atanganji is trying to create an Akum too.
Right.
And install somebody they are giving him by decree a title of chief. I say, our chiefs who are not living up to the constitution. Again, looking at the theory of creation and the theory of recognition. If you saw the facet that passed on in Boya 2-3 days ago, with a crowd of people in wrapper and t-shirts and whatever thing they were, parading as chiefs, who in his or her rightful mind would think that that crowd of people, all of them could be chiefs. In his
Exactly.
where are the chiefs? Where are the chiefs? As I read from this decree here, from this House of Chiefs, the whole Fako, call it Victoria, that was, produced how many chiefs in the house? They produced Chief Indale, they produced Mokete, Afogosin, 3. That's all. Then how do you account for having more than 50 people, 200 people standing there and calling themselves chiefs? How do you account for that? It's because Yahweh has come out with this decree of creation, which is purely political and economic. For a reminder, remember that a lot of Fako is very, very rich in terms of soil. Fako is very, very rich in terms of money. Some people put out there. The problem in Fako, call it Fako, it's not because the chiefs are poor. No. They have more than enough money. But where is this money coming from? Are they traders? Are they farming cocoa? Are they planting palms? No. The money that has come to them in thousands of millions is money deployed to them, directly or indirectly, by the government. They will seize some plantation from the CDC, create out chiefdoms. Some are going to say, oh, my great-grandfather used to live here, and our village was called ABC. They created, give you 50 acres of land, call you a great chief, give you a flag to hang on your door, and you become a chief.
Wow.
So they have created a chief. They have also created a chiefdom for him. Even in Bamunda, call it Bamunda. Let me give you an example. If Bamunda people, let me say Mancon, they call it General Mancon. How many people who live in that territory called Mancon are Mancon people? How many? If there are 500,000 people there, you don't even have of the 1,000 Mancon people. If you go to Boya, which is so big, how many people who live in Boya can claim that they are the subjects of Chief? Always palaces. And so that is how they are manipulated. They made this decree in Article 4B. They say that Article 77 that the administration shall recognize chiefs and possibly create chiefdoms for them. It is written there, right? So do that. I saw something. One of us, if you go to Southwest, if you go to Limbe, there's something they call Molewe. Molewe has a very small, it's on a city. Centuries ago, there were people living in Molewe. Now it is becoming urban. Somebody is trying to create a village called Molewe Village. They'll crown him a chief there and give him 10 acres of land, 50 acres of land. They will deploy them to the administration. Is that guy, those people who lived there 500 years ago or 50 years ago, are they still there? we must agree that the communities have become extinct over the years. You cannot revive them. And so, by decree number 77, as stated above, they are progressively implementing it. And Article 26 of that decree on chieftaincy states that chiefs shall wear uniforms as appropriate. So they design chiefs' uniforms eventually, but they are not doing it now, not because it is not the text. Just like they did with the abolition of Southern Cameroon in 1972. They are progressively implementing it. You find until now, in the whole of that territory called Cameroon, they have the most all-powerful Minister of Territorial Administration, who is everywhere, doing what he likes in the name of the government, appointing chiefs, dismissing chiefs, and doing all that based on some text which is already established.
And bribing the Pope.
And so, chieftaincy, the question is, where do we go from here? What do we foresee as chieftaincy? Chieftaincy oriented. Again, back to Boya. You saw what, I don't know where you're still counting. You saw the struggle between Chief Atom Ebako, who is supposed to be the speaker of the chairman and president of the Southwest House of Chiefs, and the president of the who is Chief Atom Ebako. Chief Atom Ebako is the chief of Talangai, somewhere near Miami and Kuti there. Talangai has less than 20 people in that place. But how do you find himself there? Who would imagine that in the rest of Southern Cameroon, the chief of Talangai with 10 people will be the president of the House of Chiefs? That would include the father of himself, Chief Ndele, and all these powerful family in the 1960 House of Chiefs composition. Will he be even qualified to be a messenger there? He will not. But what is it now? He's the president of the so-called chiefs. These so-called chiefs of the Southwest will do include, in fact, the father Fontaine from where I come. Father Fontaine was a member of the House of Chiefs. In the whole of so-called Manfred, there were only two first-class chiefs. The son of Fontaine and the son of Bamamu. These were the most powerful, including the chief Chiboban of Manfred. So, would they expect that who by definition of the 1977 is barely a chef de quartier, waterhead. Call it Damocon, they call it Damocon Street. That's a quartier, a quarter inside Bamenda, where the quarter chief can be called Chief Damocon. Funcha Street, where the chief of that quarter can be called Funcha. Would that guy very emotionally preside over a meeting in the front of Bali East, where the front of Bafoot is sitting, or the front of Malcolm? Could he? No. So we find the cacophony in the whole nonsense of what is going on now. But what is the future? The future is good enough as far as ambassador is concerned. We know, besides adulteration, the rare people who represent the chieftaincy are still there. Some of them are so like the so, but some of them are still very, they are there. So we'll go back to our roads with modifications, I'm sure, which I cannot say now because when we get to Boya, the institutions in place will take care. But this history is so heady. History cannot be changed. People build from what we had, and there will be a better future for our chiefs. And let me just go a bit to what you show us in the first clip there. You find that little boy coming from Chang. I know that is really good. It's not even a big village, but that's a small boy. He's less than 14 years old. But you see how he's being ushered in there. Does he even know what he's doing? He's so young.
Yeah.
But the input there is an institutional thing. I know his village very well. I know the village physically. But he's being ushered in there. As he grows up, he's going to be grown. And so that is where we find ourselves. We shall be able to correct the errors, I'm sure. We shall be able to build a better future for the chiefs. The House of Chiefs was not created by Yaoundé. It was formally created under Abiedu. There are many things that we have lost. That I think. Because even there in the Southern Cameroon, chieftaincy was something so secret. The institutions were there. As a colonial administration, they created the law of Southern Cameroon. The most important law they created, who left Nigeria in 1953, was the Southern Cameroon High Court law. The High Court was the court of appeal. That was the highest decision there. But prior to that, there was something they called the customary courts.
Yeah.
I've earlier mentioned that. The customary courts had to deal with those customs. There were always conflict. There were people who were struggling over the throne. The people who were fighting over fences. It was the responsibility of the customary courts to handle. It was what they called the customary court ordinance. Who went to that court? They tried it. There was a customary court at first instance. If you did not win, you went on appeal, where it was composed of 5 judges. They listened to you. They dealt with next of kin, that is succession. But what are they doing today? As I said, they are going to creation. What is happening today is if there's a disagreement, they write there their own text. The sous-prefet or the administrator would consult. How does, for example, a Baleman or Bakuriman who finds himself as the sous-prefet of Ndop, what idea is as strange in Ndop as the British man would be? He's a stranger there. What is he going to be consulting? So by our own tradition, if there was a conflict like that, which is called next of succession in Ndop, the kingmakers did what they did. What they brought to the administration was the man who is the rightful person. The administration recognized person. They didn't recognize it. I think months ago, so what was going on in Miami over chieftaincy there. It has repeated itself so much in the South for years. I remember over the years, in the 90s, the chieftaincy over Bismarck chieftaincy went to the Supreme Court because of the interview. This deal will come and change. The other will come and change. And so that is how they have destroyed the institutions. Institutions of chieftaincy is governed by tradition. There's no universal tradition, for example, in Amazonia that governs chieftaincy. The way they would crown, they would identify and crown the successor of the chief of Abiedu is different from the way they would do it in Bansor. It's different from the way they would do it in Boya. And so this should go back to their rightful places with improved version of the law. And we'll move on. That's what the future is. Over to you.
Wow, thank you so much, Barrister. We're going to be ending the program soon. But while you're talking, I just got reminded of the fact that in the 50s, 60s, 70s, a lot of weddings were done through our chieftaincies, right? You want to comment on this a little bit? Because people married through traditional marriages signed by the chiefs. You want to briefly talk about this?
Marriages have always been traditional because the way they marry you through your parents was a valid marriage. It's not the same thing. I marry my wife and so. So what the civil registry has come to do is only codifying it. When you go to marry now in the council, there's a provision on the marriage certificate. Marriage according to the custom of the Bafu people, according to the tradition of the Bansor people. You write it there.
Yeah.
So a marriage contract that was valid and is still valid. But for the purposes of getting some benefits from the government, they have to unify it by doing what? By creating what more status, by creating a register where you're now going to go out of marriage. If you marry the church, you have to go and register it there. So that anybody coming, for example, to House of France will produce a similar document to justify that you're really married. So they did not kill different places have changed. Traditionally, in the form of marriage, in my own place, they used to give so much money. As I told the native areas, they came out and said, no, it's not good to marry there for so much money. They reduced it. In some places, they will give so many cars. People can say, no, this is becoming outdated. It does not take so many cars to that out, or so many other cars or things like that. But bottom line, the cultures differ from place to place. The customs are not the same. The other, if you don't do it the same way, the girl comes to your house and she doesn't produce children, you go back to traditional sacrifices because the gods of that culture are not happy with you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to be ending the program. I just know that growing up, before all this happened in the 1990 and afterwards, we really respected chiefs. Chiefs were so revered, and sometimes there was a fear. If you hear the chief is coming, you're afraid of standing there. Women had to bow down their heads, and things have changed. Barrister, I just want you to give your closing remarks as we end this program today. I really appreciate all the information that you've given us, a lot of information. Those who've missed the program, they will probably listen to it later on and learn a wealth of information. Your closing remarks, please.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I guess, and I believe the followers, those who have followed us, or those who have recorded of it, something to learn. What we give might not be very perfect, but it's an overall outlook of what it was. This is in terms of tradition. But what I give here, in terms of the constitutional movement from 1959 to 1961 to the 1972, in terms of May 20th, it's documented history. Anybody can verify that. If you have something to contradict that version, we should put it out there. Or invite me and we'll have the debate there. But culture is mutating. Culture is what it is. And so that is what it is. Thank you for having me. I believe some people would have learned something from this. At least knowledge is to be shared. If you thought you were, you don't know where you're heading to. Over to you.
Thank you so much. We're concluding today's program on the horizon, the voice of the Amber Woman. I want to thank everybody for watching and listening. We talked about 20th May, whether it was a success or a fiasco. We believe that it was a fiasco because our people defended their territory. We saw some videos. Some of them were not shown here today, but in our different WhatsApp fora, we saw how there were no 20th May celebrations in Du and other places in the northern zone. And the little things that we saw in the west, in the southern zones, show that people were forced or bribed to participate in a day that the sole goal was to show normalcy in our area. And that's what the barrister has told us, that the goal was to show normalcy. But we know that 20th May has no relevance in our history at all. It's a day that will never be celebrated in Southern Cameroons and Ambazonia. I want to end by thanking those who worked, to make sure that the lockdown was successful between the 17th of May to the 21st. I want to thank all the ASA who did their job protecting our people. And I want to thank the people for believing in what is the truth, for believing in us, for believing in Southern Cameroons, for believing in Ambazonia, for supporting our president, President Saku, who is the leader of this journey. And we know that with time, we will eventually get to Boya. Next Monday, the coming Monday, the 20, what's Monday's date? I'm sorry. It's Memorial Day in America. So we want to celebrate and thank the people of this country for always memorizing their loved ones memorializing those who have gone ahead and celebrating them. So Memorial Day will be celebrated on Monday, the 26th, I believe. And it's a holiday. So those of you who are celebrating it, I wish you a happy Memorial Day. And we're ending the program today, and hopefully we'll be back next Friday on the horizon, the voice of the Amba woman. Wishing you a great weekend for those of you in Ambazonia. Thank you so much, and so long.